Chapter 8 of Ox-Team Days on the Oregon Trail. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Dodge. Ox-Team Days on the Oregon Trail by Ezra, Meeker, and Howard Driggs. Chapter 8. Trailing Through Mountain Land. As the columns of wagons passed up the Platte in what is now western Nebraska, there was some relief from the dust. The throng was visibly thinned out. Some had pushed on beyond the congested district, while others had lagged behind. The dead, too, had left room upon the road. When we reached the higher lands of Wyoming, our traveling became still more pleasant. The nights were cooler, and we had clearer, purer water. As we gradually ascended the Sweetwater, life grew more tolerable and discomfort less acute. We were now nearing the crest of the continent. The climb was so gradual, however, as to be hardly observable. The summit of the Rocky Mountains, through the South Pass, presents a wide, open, undulating country. The pass offers, therefore, an easy gateway to the west. Passing Pacific Springs at the summit, we rolled over to Big Sandy Creek. At this point we left the Salt Lake Trail, also known as the Mormon Trail, and took the Sublette cutoff over to Bear River. This was a shorter trail to the Oregon country, made by William Sublette, one of the American fur traders of the early days. The earlier immigrants to Oregon went on to Fort Bridger before leaving the Salt Lake route. The most attractive natural phenomenon encountered on the whole trip was found at the Soda Springs, near Bear River in Idaho. Some of the springs, in fact, are right in the bed of the river. One of them, Steamboat Spring, was spouting at regular intervals as we passed. Just after leaving Soda Springs, our little company of friends separated. The Macaulays and William Buck took the trail to California, while, with Oliver and the Davenport brothers, we went northwest to Oregon. Jacob, the younger of the brothers, fell sick and gradually grew worse as the journey grew harder. Shortly after reaching Portland, the poor boy died. Thomas Macaulay settled in the Hobart Hills in California and became a respected citizen of that state. When I last heard of him, he was 88 years old. William Buck has long since lain down to rest. A few years after we had parted on the Big Bend of the Bear River, I heard from William in a way that was characteristic of the man. He had been back to "the States," as we then called the eastern part of our country, and returning to California by way of the Isthmus of Panama, he had brought 50 swarms of bees. 3 of these swarms he sent up to me in Washington. As far as I know, these were the first honey bees in that state. William Buck was a man who was always doing a good turn for his friends. When the Snake River was reached, and in fact even before that, the heat again became oppressive, the dust stifling, and the thirst at times almost maddening. In some places we could see the water of the Snake winding through the lava gorges, but we could not reach it, as the river ran in the inaccessible depths of the canyon. Sickness again became prevalent, and another outbreak of cholera claimed many victims. There were but few ferries, and none at all in many places where crossings were to be made. Even where there was a ferry, the charges were so high that they were out of reach of most of the emigrants. As for me, all my funds had been absorbed in procuring my outfit at Eddyville, in Iowa. We had not dreamed that there would be use for money on the plains, where there were neither supplies nor people. But we soon found out our mistake. The crossing of the Snake River, although late in the journey, gave us the opportunity to mend matters. About 30 miles below Salmon Falls, the dilemma confronted us of either crossing the Snake River or having our teams starve on the trip down the river on the south bank. We found that some immigrants had caulked 2 wagon beds and lashed them together and were using this craft for crossing, but they would not help others cross for less than $3 to $5 a wagon, the party swimming their own stock. If others could cross in wagon beds, why couldn't we do likewise? Without more ado, all the old clothing that could possibly be spared was assembled, and tar buckets were scraped. Old chisels and broken knives were hunted up, and a boat repairing and caulking campaign began. Very soon the wagon box rode placidly, even if not gracefully, on the waters of the Snake River. My boyhood experience at playing with logs and leaky old skiffs in the waters of the White River now served me well. I could row a boat. My first venture across the Snake River was with the wagon gear run over the wagon box, the whole being gradually worked out into deep water. The load was so heavy that a very small margin was left to prevent the water from breaking over the sides, and some water did enter as light ripples on the surface struck the Mary Jane, for we had duly named our craft. I got over safely, but after that I took lighter loads, and I really enjoyed the work, with the change from the intolerable dust to the clear atmosphere of the river. Some people were so infatuated with the idea of floating on the water that they were easily persuaded by an unprincipled trader at the lower crossing to dispose of their teams for a song and to embark in their wagon beds for a voyage down the river. A number of people thus lost everything they had, and some even lost their lives. After terrible hardships, the survivors reached the road again to become objects of charity. I knew one survivor who was out 7 days without food other than a scant supply of berries and vegetable growth and "a few crickets, but not many." We had no trouble to get the cattle across, although the river was wide. Dandy would do most anything I asked of him, so leading him to the water's edge, with a little coaxing I got him into swimming water, and guided him across with the wagon bed. The others all followed, having been driven into deep water after their leader. It seems almost incredible how passively obedient cattle will become after long training on such a journey. Indeed, the ox is always patient, and usually quite obedient. But when oxen get heated and thirsty, they become headstrong and reckless and won't obey. I have known them to take off the road to a water hole, when apparently nothing could stop them, till they had gone so far into the mud and water that it was a hard job for them to get out again. We had not finished crossing when tempting offers came from others to cross them, but all our party said, "No, we must travel." The rule had been adopted to travel some distance every day that it was possible. "Travel, travel, travel," was the watchword, and nothing could divert us from that resolution. On the 3rd day we were ready to pull out from the river, with the cattle rested by the enforced wait. Now the question was, what about the lower crossing? Those who had crossed over the river must somehow get back. It was less than 150 miles to the place where we must again cross to the south side, the left bank of the river. I could walk that distance in 3 days, while it would take our teams 10. Could I go on ahead, procure a wagon box, and start a ferry of my own? The thought brought an affirmative answer at once. With only food and a small blanket for load, I walked to the lower crossing. It may be ludicrous, but it is true, that the most I remember about that tramp is the jackrabbits. Such swarms as I traveled down the Boise Valley! I had never seen before, and never saw again. I soon obtained a wagon bed, and all day long for several days I was at work crossing people. I continued at this till our teams came up, and for a few days after that. I left the river with $110 in my pocket. All but $2.75 of this was gone before I arrived in Portland. But we could not delay longer, even to make money. I thought I could see signs of failing strength in my young wife and the baby. Not for mountains of gold would we jeopardize their lives. All along the way the baby and the little mother had been tenderly cared for. We used to clear away a space in the wagon bed for them to take a nap together. The slow swaying of the wagon over smooth, sandy stretches made a rockabye movement that would lull them off to a dreamland and make them forget the weary way. When we left the lower crossing, the mother and baby were placed in a small wagon. A sprightly yoke of oxen was hitched to it, that they might get an early start and keep out of the dust. What few delicacies the pioneers had were given to them. By this tender care the mother and child were enabled to continue to the end of the long journey, though the brave little mother was frail and weak from the wearisome struggle, before we reached a resting place at last. What became of that baby? He thrived and grew to manhood, and he is now living 69 years of age in California. Some of his grandchildren are almost grown to manhood and womanhood. End of chapter 8.